So, hello everybody. I'm Eduardo Kolody, and I'd like to thank you so much for this opportunity. Today we're going to interview world famous author and game designer Mark Rein Hagen. We're going to talk about some of his early writings, of course, like Vampire the Masquerade and The World of Darkness, but also about other games he designed, like his last work, Lostlorn. I would like to dedicate this moment to a deceased friend of us, João Cícero. He worked with us and he was a World of Darkness live encyclopedia. I'm sure he would like to love be watching or making this interview. So, hi Mark, how are you doing?
Good, good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Well, unfortunately, we couldn't this interview live, so we organized a script that include questions sent from our community.
Great.
I'm sure you have a lot of fans in Brazil and in Goiânia. I think during the 90s here, Vampire made a lot more success than D&D and other RPGs. And we have a sort of a brotherhood of masters, of game masters. And I asked a few players and storytellers to send questions. Well, first things first, this interview is part of a convention named Elysium, which is a name that I link is it's linked to Greek and Roman mythology, but also to vampire. It's a kind of a meeting place to chat, to make friends. And do you believe that this is the power of the analogic games, or to say, the tabletop games, RPGs, LARPs, meeting people, looking the eyes, making friends? Do you believe in this?
Oh, yeah, especially role-playing games. Yeah, I think all people have, not all people, but a lot of people have social anxiety, and alcohol was invented. Really, its main use is to help lubricate social activities so you don't feel that same anxiety. And I think games, especially role-playing games, can work even better than alcohol because it doesn't impair you and it gives you something to do and a focus and a purpose while you're engaged in social activity. And we all need social activity. It's just that now that we live beyond the clan size, it used to be we're evolved for like 200 people that we know the name of and that we live around, right? And then maybe once a year or so you have a bigger gathering, right? But
Yeah.
we're not used to this constantly new people all the time, and it's just as very stress invoking. And if you're given a game, and a kind of a shared mythology and a shared purpose, it makes it so much easier. And it's fun. It actually, you know, it's something that's fun to do, and it sort of creates a community that unlike anything else. Like that, do you have a community in a bar or a nightclub? Well, sure, yeah, but would it still be around 30 years later, the same community? Maybe not, and that's sort of the difference, isn't it?
Well, I'm a historian myself, and it seems that a lot of history students like RPGs. Have you graduated in history or something? What are your favorite history authors and books?
Um, I'm a huge fan of hardcore history, and I haven't studied history as in college, but I'm hugely a fan of you know um, all things history. I've been reading history since I was a kid. I started with David McCullough, who's a pretty famous American writer. James Meacham, all that. You know, um, but what's his name? Devant. Oh
Hmm.
no, my dad had all his books, and I read them as a kid. Now I can't remember the name. Hold on. This is embarrassing.
No, I'm not good in remembering names of people. It's sometimes we have to check it, so Google is really good for this.
Yeah, yeah. Hold on, I'm finding it now. It's driving me nuts. Yeah, I'll Durant. My favorite history author is William Durant. Well, it's
Hmm.
actually Will and Ario, his wife. They wrote the books together for most of them, and I think they are just the Durant books are by far the best. And what they do, I think, better than most history books is people when they think of history, they think of history as like a recitation of facts about what happened. And that's really not what history is. Because, first of all, we know we don't have exact facts, right? If there's an
Hmm.
accident or a trial and you have eyewitness account, how often is that eyewitness account 100% factual? The answer is never, right? Eyewitness accounts are notoriously unreliable. So that means there's no history, which is a true recitation of the facts. But what historians truly are trying to do is they're trying to see, the patterns of history and what's really going on to give us some sense of the time we're going through and what is coming. And history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And so Durant, better than any other historical writer, has really captured this idea of sort of trying to get an idea of what was going on and how that has affected our time today, and how that, to sort of explain us today by what we've come from and the
Hmm.
patterns that we see in the world around us. You can totally see it in the world, right? So, for instance, anyone who analyzes it from a geopolitical standpoint, what is going on in Russia with the invasion of Ukraine, and then earlier the invasion of Georgia, where I was living at the time, the taking of Crimea, you cannot understand that without also comparing that to Chamberlain's appeasement of Hitler,
Hmm.
right? There's obviously parallels there, and it's the same thing with China. And so, understanding that is, I think, a key part of like seeing the time we're going through. So anyway, I think Durant had a huge effect on Vampire, and definitely my love of vampires partly comes from the idea that you can meet these people out of history who literally were alive, let's say at the time of Christ or something, or the French Revolution, and they're still around today. And that is a fascination about vampires. I think is really interesting. What's more is that anyone who knows someone who is older, they have ways of speaking and they have an attitude about things that is clearly of a different age, right? And the older a person is, the more kind of removed they are. And it's very fascinating to me always, to talk to people from this different time, like recently I talked to this man who's 99 years old, and most of the people of his generation are long gone, but I grew up with them. I know those people. And it
Hmm.
was just so startling to talk to someone who came out of the age that he came out of. And he's still sharp as a whip, but different. And I think that's one of the things that always fascinates me about vampires, the idea that there's still be active people around who represented 300 years ago, right? 400, 500. And what would that be like to talk to someone who has ingrained in them the attitudes of their youth, from 300 years ago?
That's very interesting. And did you like to listen to music while playing Vampire? Which band or artist did you like it at that time?
I put them all in the books, right? The quotes are there. It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
All those 80s and 90s bands, mostly goth, industrial, some new wave. They're all the bands of my youth as well. So, I try to stay current though on music. And I've always thought about, well, if I had to use music today for a vampire, what would it be? And it's tricky because it's just a completely different era, right?
Hmm.
This era doesn't really have much gothic punk to it, you know? There are some bands out there which are sort of nostalgia bands, I guess you could say, but you know, there's not much, and I love the music. I love current music, but like in America, like the current pop music is very country folk in a way, or very synth pop, you know. So it's just a different age.
Different mood.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think RPGs encourages people to read.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, most people don't read anymore, and TikTok has made that. I thought it was bad before, but TikTok has made it so much worse.
Yeah,
And
I
the people,
agree.
it's almost like we're regressing to, there was a time in the Middle Ages, for instance, when, only some people could read, scribes, and even royalty couldn't read, right? Like Charlemagne couldn't read. It wasn't until the 14th century that nobilities, the children of nobility, were taught to read. Um, and then suddenly literacy became paramount because it became the way for everyone to sort of rise above. And there was a time in America where just before radio, where even coal miners had almost 100% literacy rate. They had lending libraries. Their unions had lending library, and everyone would read at night, right? Because they had gas lighting or electric lighting, and everyone read. It was an entertainment. And then what happened? Radio came out, and a lot of people stopped reading because they had radio. And then TV came out. A lot of people stopped reading because of TV. And then and then DVDs came out and cassette tapes for movies at home. Oh, even more. And then now today, because of TikTok, I think young people in particular, most of them don't read for fun, and I think that's a huge loss. But at the same time, times change, right? And are do people still write? Yeah, probably people write now more than ever, right? And they
Hmm.
do read. They read each other's text messages, right? So there is a lot of that going on. But are they reading like books, like and really do they know how to take in information in terms of a book? Well, most people probably not, and that's a shame. But at the same time, is it a tragedy? Well, maybe not. I think it's a tragedy,
Yeah,
but times change, and well, if you don't need to read to get information, if you can figure out how to fix your sink without buying a help, nowadays if you need to fix your sink, you just watch a YouTube video. You don't need
hmm,
to buy a self-help book anymore. It used to be you'd buy a self-help book, right? Now you just watch a YouTube video, which is more practical, which is more efficient, you know. But I
yeah,
do hope that role-playing games as books always stick around, because I think it's a beautiful medium, and I think if people learn a lot, and I think for people who like that sort of thing, it's a great game. Also, if we ever have a technological, you know, breakdown, which is possible, I mean,
yeah.
role playing would survive, wouldn't it? If there
Hmm.
was books out there and dice, it survives. That's all you need, right? That's all you need.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel.
Well, there is a music professor named Keith Swanwick that says that it's important to compose music even before you learn everything about playing an instrument. I'd like to think a little about it, about RPGs and creating characters. For example, I'm releasing a game where the mages are the protagonists, and I assume that making the character is a nice time to spend playing, but more like a meta game when you are building the characters. So when you were creating the World of Darkness lores, did you make the stories playing, or did this kind of meta game? Like
You
you
know,
sat around. Uh,
my playtesters all quit because they thought it was a stupid. They thought Vampire was stupid. They wouldn't. They don't admit this now, but my first playtesters all quit. They wouldn't
mhm,
play. They thought the game system was dumb, and they thought the setting was dumb. And I was so rushed for time, I didn't really have time to have a playtesters later on. So basically, it was mostly me alone in my office, working day and night, trying to write as fast as possible. Having a few conversations with people. My partner Stuart Wick, I would run in his office with new ideas and talk it over. But mainly, it was just me on an you know, old computer, very old now, but even then it was old. Just trying to, and those days there wasn't even online thesaurus. I had to use a real thesaurus, And I looked up words so many times in a dictionary, I had to do a little tick mark on them. And so some words had like 5 ticks because I kept re-looking up, like Elysium. I kept using. I go, oh wait a minute, I forgot exactly what Elysium meant. I had my dad gave me his Oxford English Dictionary, which is the big OED book. I had the double volume, and I just do little tick marks on it, just so you can understand a word very precisely. Um, and yeah. So anyway, no play testers. It just was. But I had played a lot of games, and I'd worked on. I was working on a lot of different games, and I'd already come out with a game called Ars Magica. So I
Hmm.
already kind of knew how play test. In Ars Magica, we play tested extensively. So I had the experience of play testing, and I kind of knew how it would work, and so I could kind of almost imagine the play testing. And it's still, I made mistakes with the game system. In terms of the setting, though, I think it was perfect. I didn't need play testing for the setting. And really, for a role playing game, a good role playing, the game rules are secondary. The setting is the game system, right?
Yeah,
A
I
good
agree.
setting is a game system in and of itself. Right? A good role playing game, you could just have people write a 4 page, character history, and then use the setting. You could play a perfectly great role playing game with no game rules at all, and just a 4 page written personal history,
Hmm.
and the setting. Right? It would work fine for the certain people. Some people would miss it, and you could still have dice rolling, and you can still work up a system on your own. But you don't need a game. The for a really good in-depth role-playing game, the setting is far more important than the rules, and the setting in many ways are the rules, right? So, for
Yeah,
instance, in Vampire, the way you have, Elysium, you're not allowed to use violence in there, and and blood bonds are illegal, and the prince enforces this, but he's, you know, the the council controls, has some say over what the prince does, and the different clans fight with each other, and something there's a whole coterie chart of who likes who and who doesn't like who. Okay, boom, right? That is a complex set of social rules and real life laws, right? In terms of the setting, that is, you know, that gives a context for behavior and of risk and rewards, of how things work, and that's kind of the basis of all the storytelling.
yeah, nice. You wrote a game named Democracy, probably because of your work. It linked reality in a game. How did you become a political consultant?
Oh, when I was young, I worked in politics in America as a speechwriter, and so that was always a parallel career with gaming. And I always thought gaming as kind of a side hustle, and you can tell from my work in gaming, and I'm really deeply into politics, right? Because Vampire is a very political game. It's all about the politics, and I think politics is very interesting. I think all humans engage in politics, whether they realize it or not. Every workplace is riven with politics. Every social club is riven with politics, and it's just part of the human condition that we are so obsessed with who's in what group, what they believe, who sides with who. This is just part of it. So, and then when 9/11 happened, it was pretty clear to me that I needed to go do some stuff abroad, go do some work, not necessarily for America, but for democracy, for peace, to try and, it just seemed like gaming sort of didn't become important to me anymore after 9/11. And so around that time is when I moved and started doing a lot of work in the Middle East and Central Asia, Africa, you know, Asia. Traveled a lot for a while.
It's really interesting. Well, as we speak and as we read you, there's a strong link between real events, real world, and the supernatural world in the world of darkness. But there is something that is also present in other authors of that time, like, for example, Annie Rice or Neil Gaiman. Do you think that was a kind of a zeitgeist of that moment?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, one reason why I sort of made the game Gothic Punk is that I knew goth music well, and I knew the goth subculture pretty well. I wasn't a goth myself, but I knew about it, and I would visit it, and I could see that it was sort of goth came out of the goth music scene, came out of the punk scene of the late '70s, and it was kind of continued that and sort of modified it and worked it. And then also, the end of the Cold War kind of just gave this burst of optimism and happiness. And plus, we just came out of the '80s, which in America at least was a very happy, fun time. So yeah, I just sort of I could tell that vampires are going to be this like a dark. In happy times, people tend to want dark things. In dark times, people want more happy things. Not completely, but that's generally the way it is. And so the '90s was actually a pretty happy time for a lot of people, especially in the Western world. And so people kind of wanted, to explore darkness a little bit and sort of, explore their shadow in Jungian terms, right?
Hmm.
Whereas today, I think, well, first of all genres are evergreen now, right? So even if something's out, there's still going to be a group of people who are still into it, right? So people are still into vampires today, but are
Hmm.
vampires have become a mainstream, hugely successful pop culture phenomenon right now? Maybe not. You know, um, people are looking for escapism right now, more than they're looking for, horror. But there's still going to be horror movies. There's still going to be lots of horror stuff out there. It's just not
Hmm.
going to be as mainstream. But in the early '90s when Vampire came out, first of all, Dungeons and Dragons was not doing well. TSR was killing off the Golden Goose, literally strangling their own Golden Goose, right? The same way WotC right now is seemingly trying to kill D&D as a gaming thing, at least. I mean, they'll keep it alive as an IP, but as a gaming platform, they seemingly want to kill it, right? So it's similar to what's happening in the '90s. But gamers still were dying for games, but they were getting older. That big wave of gamers that came in the '80s, that you see in Stranger Things. Those
Uh-huh.
Stranger Things kids were a lot of the early fans of Vampire. Like I've always imagined those Stranger Thing kids turning to I always thought that'd be a great way to end the series if they switched to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would be.
because that would be very apropos. That's what happened. But
Hmm.
anyway, all these gamer kids who played D&D were tired of D&D. D&D was clearly dying, and we came in the right moment. We had the right marketing campaign, and we had the right product, and it was and we made it cool. And most importantly, I made it so that girls would play it. Right,
Hmm.
that girls would like it, and that would appeal to girls on a different level. And up until then, D&D was excluded women. Right, some girls did play, but it was very rare. Going to a convention and seeing a girl was like seeing a unicorn in a shopping mall. It's just not something you saw. And then the year after Vampire came out, there were suddenly lots and lots of women at the convention. And all the other companies, people from the other game companies came up to me, Mark, you changed gaming. And I was like, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's really nice. It's present in recent, not so recent, a documentary they made about the scene, the World of Darkness scene in that moment. Well, I would like to ask more things about the zeitgeist, but I think you said it. And but another question is, have you talked to those other authors like Any Rise or New Game? Have you met them and talked something about this? I don't know about your relation with this other authors, but it seems to be interesting to know
I
if
mean, I
something
used to be
happened
much more
between you.
connected with the game industry than I am today.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to help up and coming writers a lot. That was one of my things that was very important to me to help people establish their careers. Nowadays, I think people are it's easier to get information on how to become successful, and people kind of are, they form sort of coalitions almost with other up and coming authors, and it's just a very different thing. In the
Different
80s and
times.
90s, it's different times. So people use online communities more, and there's a lot more information out there. You don't necessarily need someone like me to come and tell you, here's how to find a publisher, here's how to edit, here's how to find a printer, here's how to work with freelancers, here's how to pay artists, here's how to write a contract. Like, it was very complicated before. There's a lot to learn, and there was no resources to know
Hmm.
how to do it. And so game company owners, we tend to be very nice, and we tend to help people even if they became competitors, because that's just how it worked, and we all love role playing, and so we
Hmm.
wanted to see role playing and gaming survive. Now that information is more freely available, and people are much more mercenary and much more selfish of their own fans. They don't want to share their fan group. They don't want to help someone unless that person can help them.
Hmm.
And so there's a much more, at least in America, everyone kind of, and then also politics have entered it. So, a lot of people hide their politics if they're right wing, and if they're left wing, they tend to flaunt it, right? And
Hmm.
so there's this whole thing where you can cancel someone who's your rival just
Yeah.
just just to get rid of them, and so that gives you more fans, right? So I think it's sad in a way. Like, it used to be so collegial and so cooperative and so all for the sake of gaming, and now it's very mercenary, and that's just partly also there's just so much more money in it, right? Like once Vampire made it big, and it was clear there's a lot of money in role playing, and
Hmm.
once like Magic came in and made it clear that gaming is $1 billion industry,
Yeah.
right? Then suddenly it's no longer like this fun little club like it was when I was younger. It's now a cutthroat business.
Hmm. So, well, you said of something about it, but can you say more attributes of the actual zeitgeist? What is important now for players and writers? I agree with a lot of things you said now, but is there something else you can say? Maybe good things about the actual moment?
I mean, zeitgeist tends to be about you need to appeal to younger people, right? Older people tend to be more set in their ways and more focused on nostalgia. So the zeitgeist of a certain period of time tends to be people under 30 and maybe above the age of 12. And so you have like an 18-year period there of people. And zeitgeist sort of has to capture what they've gone through in their childhood. So the key thing is to talk to people who are that age and what they're into and how they feel, but also to sort of know that what that generation is like, and Gen Z and Gen, is it Y? Yeah, supposedly are, I mean, at least in America, like I grew up free range, and my kids grew up free range, where I was allowed to go wherever I wanted. I could go in the woods for the whole day and
Hmm.
show up at dinner time, and it was fine, right? Nowadays, kids tend to be much more protected, and so I think part of the zeitgeist is that, and I think that's maybe why people want trigger warnings now, and like warnings at the beginning of even books, right? It's not just movies and TV shows. Books need to have warnings. Oh, there could be whatever inside of this, because people have grown up at least in America and the West, where they're protected from these things. And
Hmm.
so I think maybe the zeitgeist was moving towards like more hardcore, right? As a reaction to this protectedness, that people want something, that's a bit more dangerous. And that's kind of what Vampire did in the 90s, right? It was very dangerous role playing.
Yeah.
There were distributors and stores who would not carry Vampire initially for the first like 4 years
Hmm.
because we were too dangerous. And they thought that we could be demonic and that we would get them in trouble. But that made, of course, what did that do? That made a lot of people want the books even more, right?
Yeah.
Because something dangerous is something that is valuable. right?
Hmm.
It makes it valuable. And so I think there's going to be maybe a reaction to that, but that's not part of the zeitgeist now. We're still in the safety zone right now, where people legitimately believe that being saying and doing dangerous things is bad for society and culture and should be banned. So you're taking a huge risk by doing something like that. But I think it's about to change, and whoever's ready for that change and jumps on it at that when that happens or just before it happens will do very well. The question is,
Okay.
when is that going to happen,
Yeah, yeah. And how, especially
and
how.
how, and where, and what where we'll start? And yeah, so in a way, you have to. It's almost like you have to make your own zeitgeist. You have to just go with what you love, and then you're rolling the dice. In a slightly different parallel world, vampire might never have caught fire. Who knows?
Yeah. What you said about America, I believe it works for Brazil also. Very similar ways to think about this protection and this too much online society would have the good side, but also a very dark side, strange side of having child in this way.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell a little story to make the next question.
Okay.
Once I talked to a very spiritualized person, a woman, who said she could communicate with spirits, and so we are friends. She saw me playing or talking about RPG and asked me to explain her what was that thing, and so I told her a few things about Mage Dissension, and in the end she just said, "But it's not a game. It's a way to hide the real knowledge." And we talked a lot about that. We just started to talk about this blend of reality and literature that we have in many of these stories. I'd like to ask, what can you say about that? Did you have any similar experience where maybe fictional word and some story wrote or played or helped to write a touch of the reality? Do you believe in the supernatural world in some way, anything, and how?
I mean, I'm deeply into like the original ideas of, I'm a big Jungian, sort of the whole universal unconsciousness, the power of mythology, the whole power of myth, of Joseph Campbell, and then of course memetics. The idea that ideas are like DNA and they spread and not memes like they talk about on social media, but
Hmm. Hmm. I
actual,
understand.
the science of memetics. And so I think there is a truth to that, and that I think ideas are tangible and real in many ways, and they literally we just can't grab hold of them to make them tangible for real, but they're really there, they're really out there, and it affects everything. And I think the best way to think about that is that our consciousness and our minds are made up of stories, and that we think in terms of stories, and that stories are the lingua franca of human interaction. That we live inside stories. Our life is a story, right? We see our own life as a story. Our consciousness is our idea that we're a story. I think maybe storytelling began before consciousness, and then suddenly someone was like, "Wait a minute, I'm the hero of my own story."
Hmm.
That's probably not accurate, but anyway, it's very. Um, I think storytelling is very key. So I have always felt like my worlds and my stories are real. Like when I'm in a role playing game, I'm of two minds. One part of me is thinking, the mechanics and what's going on, and who's there people around me, but at the same time, there's a part of my brain where I'm actually believe I'm in that story. I'm in the story. I'm in the story the whole time. It's not my whole brain, but it's part of my brain. And I'm deeply into the story and I'm imagining it and I'm there. So, and it's kind of like a parallel track going on. And so I think, these things are real. And for me, my stories are a lot of them are made up of these powerful scenes and from movies and me reading books, that my imagination. And so, and I'll just change it, right? So, like with vampire, all these mobster movies I love so much. I would just sort of changed them in my mind. And so instead of the Godfather, it was the Methuselah talking to his, the guys. You know what I mean? It was just this, so just transpose that scene to a vampire scene, and boom, I suddenly could visualize vampire. And so that's what I was doing in my office, which is also my bedroom at the time, by the way. We were very poor,
Mm-hmm.
extremely poor. I was eating ramen for dinner pretty much every day for a year and end. It was just a way to capture and visualize the world, which I think is the most important thing when you're creating a world. Is and then and game masters know this. You've got to create a picture. As soon as the players can visualize a place, they're in. They're involved. They like it. They can interact. They can tell you what they want to do. If you can't get them to visualize it, and some game masters are not good at that, right? It's very, very hard to have a game. You
And
know?
there are some meditative process that involves this kind of thing, visualizing things and describing even to yourself. It's a very deep mental process. Uh,
Yeah.
well, looking to the past of Vampire, do you think it was a good idea to play with Sabbath characters? And furthermore, do you think that a punk gothic scenario is still interesting? I think you already answered that, but that was something a games master friend of us asked me to ask this. Or maybe it must be revised, this punk gothic scenario, because of the 21st century problems.
I mean, I think Sabat are. I mean, it was always inevitable people were going to play Sabat, right? Whether or not we gave rules or books, but a game publisher for does role playing games, you survive on creating books that people buy, right? And they need content, right? And any IP thing nowadays is that they need content, right? So, like, look at Star Wars. I mean, some of the most popular characters are Sith, and does any, and some of the most popular IP talks about the Sith and goes into them. And is that considered bad? No. It's just you need really good bad guys, and the Sabbat are really good bad guys, right?
Hmm.
That was the whole point of Sabbat, is that we needed vampires to be bad, and for real bad, not like Twilight sparkly vampires like in Twilight, right? They need to be bad. And so World of Darkness vampires are very bad, but the Camarilla are bad. They're bad, but Sabbat's even worse. you know,
Hmm.
and so it's really key to make them really, really bad. But of course, at some point, people don't want to play them, and it was inevitable.
Hmm.
To say that our times, everyone wants things so sanitized that you can't do that. Well, maybe that's true. If so, that's a dang shame, because you know people are much more strict when it comes to role playing games and comic books and novels than they are of movies and TV. It's almost like movies and TV can get away with anything, and then they want to censor what they can have a say over. They don't have a say over movies and TV, so they can get away with anything. They can make a villain the hero of the show. Like, look at the Joker movie. Like, he's
Hmm.
murdering people on TV, and he's the anti-hero of the movie. Now, could
Yeah.
we get away with that in a role playing game? No way, right? To
Hmm.
that degree, could you get away with that? No, you couldn't. But that's actually the problem with all these this Karen mentality that we have today, is that people, if they can use their powers of appeal to the bureaucratic state, to functionaries, to the crowd, they can control these small companies in a way they can't control the big companies, and they therefore sort of destroy art that people like them are creating. And
Hmm.
art is created by human beings. And should we censor art? I don't think we should. I think it's really foolish,
Hmm.
but yet now everyone wants to. And but
Yeah,
yet they
that's
don't,
true.
but yet they're not the art that really matters, the really big popular art that everyone sees. Oh, we leave that alone. And they get away with everything, right?
Mhm.
You know? And that's not cool. And all you're doing is you're stomping on the little guy, on the people who are trying to make art for themselves, and you're letting these giant, often evil or uncaring corporations, get away with stuff that and having power we really shouldn't want them to have. So I have strong feelings on this.
Hmm.
And I think that this whole preoccupation of it's a different time now and we don't do things like that. And there's things we don't talk about. And there's things we don't do. I think that's really a shame. Like being transgressive is part of what being young is about, like breaking the rules, right? And what seems like what the younger people today are very preoccupied with is enforcing rules and
Hmm.
setting up a structure which does not allow things. And that's not healthy. Like you want people breaking the rules, and trust me, the next generation coming along, for sure, will be wanting to break all these rules, for sure.
Yes, and make different things. You need to break
Yes,
rules.
yes, and be creative and form a new
Yeah.
society, and not a society so strict and
Hmm.
based on what other people say is the moral and just way. And when it's clearly immoral, right? It's clearly immoral to cancel people in such a huge. I think all of us who are involved in industry, we know many people who've lost their careers, indeed their lives, from
Hmm.
being canceled for no good reason. I have a friend who was canceled for touching a woman's knee under the table. No one saw it, and he's now banned from science fiction conventions all over the world. I mean, is that fair? I don't know. I don't
Certainly
think it
not.
is.
I don't think it is.
So it's sort of like, but yet people get upset. They got these sort of, so it's clearly that's going to end at some point.
Hmm.
Um, and the question is what it was going to be replaced with. I hope something more free, and I hope people will not try to cancel and restrict and censor art like this anymore. Because once you start doing the little guys and you let the big companies get away with it, that's going to be bad, because that means the powers that be have control over our imaginations. And because if everyone else is censored except for them, then that means no everyone will be just watching them and ignoring everything else, and that would be a terrible, terrible thing.
Oh, thank you so much for this answer. I'm very happy that someone like you can say something to this strange cancel culture we are living in.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, let's get on with more vampires, but Lostlorn now. Are there guidelines you think the existing vampire and also Lostlorn above vampires? Do you think Lostlorn is becoming what you thought?
yeah. I mean, Lost Lorn is basically the world of darkness. Sort of the ideas that I had before even World of Darkness. Because originally I was playing with the ideas of having vampires and werewolves and changelings. That was all from my this even before my first role playing game, Ars Magica, which is
Hmm.
set in the medieval Europe. It was just part of my D&D campaigns. I always thought like those classic monsters were so much more interesting than just a giant dragon flying out of the sky, because they were part of the politics. Like a werewolf could be a king, a vampire could be a queen. They're part of the human world, which once again is what politics. So even as a kid, my role playing games tend to be much more concerned about what happened back in the city and the town than in the dungeon, right?
Hmm.
So when I was playing with ideas of having all these characters be characters, so I would let people be a vampire, and I came up with D&D rules. And so basically, this takes all those ideas, and in the D20 game system, which is what and at least in America, that's the lingua franca of gaming systems right now. D&D has been the overly dominant game system. D20 has been the overly dominant game system for so long now that everyone knows how to play that system. But the character sheet has dots. So it
Hmm.
combines the D20 with what I like most about the World of Darkness system, the storyteller system, which is the sort of the dots, and the which by the way, the purpose of the dots was always that you don't want to intimidate non-gamers. Like as a math person, I love numbers on a sheet. To me, that's fascinating. I'll look at it. But the truth is, most people, if you put a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper, their eyes glaze over,
Mm,
right? And so the reason for the dots is to take away all the numbers, or at least
yeah,
most of them,
understood.
so that it's not intimidating to people, and they can sort of relate to the character sheet in a more human, easygoing way.
Mm-hmm.
So I always thought that was a key facet of the game, is to do that for the people who are not hardcore gamers and love numbers. Even modern board games, they avoid numbers like the plague, right? You usually, if you do have numbers, at the most, the highest number will be a 13 or 14, maybe a 15. And you only have one set of numbers on the entire board game. And even then, a lot of board games have done away with numbers completely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because numbers intimidate people. So, but Lostlorn is basically this fantasy world of my own invention. It's basically like but the idea is that anyone who dies in our world at sea is what they think is going on ends up in Lostlorn. It's kind of like a far realm from like Wraith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the dead people go. And it's a world which has all our different cousins, like the Desnovians and the Neanderthals and the Florentians, and they've evolved over time to become more fantasy type races, but they're still very proto-human. And it's a world in which there's lots of giant trees because I love
Mm-hmm.
trees. And of course, the different games are Fang Night. Then we have Badlander, where you play the hunters, and then we have Bane Night, which is our werewolf game. And we're doing all the different games. You can play these different classic races in a fantasy world, and I think it's going to it's going to sort of make it very easy to get new players because it's going to be a game system they know, um,
Mm-hmm.
but a much simpler than D&D. D&D is far, far too complicated. I'm a much more minimalist person myself. But you still need enough rules that people can feel like they can advance and go. And then also it doesn't break down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know, but if all your viewers know, but D&D, you break after you get to like 10th level, 11th level, it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
starts to break down and you can't play it. And at
Yeah.
14th level, it's impossible to break. It's impossible to play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our games all have you go up to 1 through 7th level as sort of an adept, and then you go through 1 to 7 levels as a master. So the highest level is basically 14, and then that's as far as you can go. So just and then as a master, you don't gain new hit points. You only gain hit points as an adept. So you start getting more and more powerful, but it becomes easier and easier to die because you're not getting more hit points. So the whole idea is to make it, it doesn't break down like D&D. And so even a vampire, it's a dangerous life. You can refill your blood fairly easily by drinking blood
Mm-hmm.
and get health back. But if that's not accessible to you right there in that moment, yeah, you can you're in trouble. And I think that's key to role playing, right? Because in a role playing game, there is no losing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for most role playing games, the game master's not going to kill the players ever, right? And there's no winner, right? It's not like a board game. It is a winner. And so if there's no losing, there's no winner. What are the stakes? Well, you can kind of pretend, and you can kind of role players are good at pretending that they're scared, right? But it's much better if, as a game master, you are willing to kill the character, and then you have that very real thing of maybe you can't win, right? There is no single winner. At least you can go up in rank, but there's no winner. But there's that fear of, oh, I could lose my character who I dearly love. That then there's stakes, and we all know from movies that in a movies with no stakes or low stakes, those are the movies we're not interested in. It's as clear as day, right? You look at any movie, and the movies that are boring and dull are the movies in which there's no that feels like there's no stakes. That the characters are as they're just sort of going through the movie, right? But if you have a movie with high stakes and it really matters, and I'm not talking about fake high stakes like it'll destroy the universe or it'll destroy the world, right? That's bullshit. But like you care about
Mm-hmm.
they get you to care about the character and the character's in life or death situation, right? Boom, that story grabs you. Well, a good role playing game, you need the same thing. And the thing about a low magic world like Lostlorn is that you don't have these resurrection spells. You don't have these insta healing spells. You don't have all these things that can just, let you avoid death like that. It feels more real and tangible because of that. There's stakes, and that's why I think
Hmm.
that's why low magical settings, fantasy settings work so much better. Because
Yeah,
in high,
I
because in
agree
high
completely.
magic, there's no stakes. There's nothing.
Hmm.
It's like living in lollipop
Players
land.
wants to be gods, like there's
Yeah,
no limit.
yeah. So be a god. You know,
It's a bit boring. Like,
it'd be very boring.
yeah.
Unless, of course, gods can die, and
Yeah.
and then suddenly it's not really a god game anymore, is it?
But even so, you become too powerful, and it's not the same thing. You don't have the tension of, well, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I can die. No, you can solve anything. So it's not the same thing playing in high and low magic fantasy worlds. Can you talk more about the the creative process of making Lostlorn? Because it seems you made a team all around the world with very interesting people working with you. We have a few videos where you talked about that, and there is an interview here in Brazil, I guess. His name is João Dirceu. He talked
Okay.
some things about the lore, but I'd like to know more about the creative process. How does it works?
Um, yeah, I mean, first of all, I deeply believe in collaboration. I think role playing is a collaborative art form, and it is an art form, and it's all about sharing imagination with people at a table or in walking around in life, and sort of joining your imaginations together and seeing the world through each other's eyes. And that's a beautiful thing. And so I think the greatest works of art are collaborations. One reason why movies are paramount art form is that you not only have the director, but you have the music director, you have the set designer, you have the clothing designer, you have makeup, wardrobe, hair, you know, um, all these things, all these different departments come together to create something great. It's collaborative, and
Mhm.
the whole is much greater than the sum of the parts. And so collaboration is incredible, and I'll always go for collaboration. I think that I'm an original thinker, but not necessarily a deep thinker, right? I think I'm
Mhm.
intelligent, of course I do, but I think my true talent is being creative. So that means I'm not so good at like the fine details, of organization, necessarily of play testing, right? So having people work with you on these things is really great. And if you don't mind sharing credit, and I don't, I think helping people along is great, and helping people learn how to be in game industry and how to be creative is a great thing. And so working with people is wonderful. And if they go on to do something on their own, I am so happy for them. Right? I'm not someone who is in any way jealous or angry. I want everyone to have the job that they want, and if that's to be creative, then but there are ways in which I think I understand through so many years of doing this that you can sort of give people hints, that help them. And like one of the key hints that I always tell people is, kill your darlings, right? It's an old writer's advice that if there's something in a story that you just love so much and you just keep it in there,
Ah,
even though it's causing a problem, you got to kill those. You got to kill your darlings, right? And in game design, what it is that you tend to create a setting or things in your setting and you stick to it because, oh, I invented this out of nothing. This is my idea. And then you don't want to get rid of it, even though it's not great. And what you have to be willing to do is edit, re-edit, and edit again and come up with new stuff and not be afraid that you have a limit. A lot of people think they have a limited number of creative ideas and their creativity is somehow going to stop, and that's not really true because the more you're creative, the more ideas you're going to have. and
Mhm.
your creative ideas aren't worth anything. It's only the work you put into them. So don't put that work into it until you really believe in them, and just come with more and more ideas. Have a notebook and just sit there and write down all your great ideas, and don't fall in love with any one of them, but try to piece them together in a beautiful collage. And then when one piece doesn't work, throw it out. Who cares if it was your first idea? Who cares if it was your favorite idea? It doesn't fit the collage anymore. And what you're doing
Mhm.
is you're building a collage, a beautiful collage. And the collage is what matters. And the work you put into writing it and finding artists to work on it and everything else, that's what matters, not your ideas. The ideas will come out, but it's the collage as a whole that matters.
Oh, that's awesome. What can we expect for Lostlorn in the next months?
In the next month, I'm hoping to
Months,
have
maybe next year. So I don't know
yeah,
what's
yeah.
about to come.
Fang Night is mostly done. We're going to hopefully have a playtest copy going out soon. So if
Oh,
anyone wants to find that, please go to Lostlorn Games.com and sign up for being a playtester, and we'll send you a free copy of the PDF.
great.
It's a fully. I did the layout, but I think it looks pretty good. It's every page has art, full color art. I think it looks beautiful, and yeah, hopefully that's to be Fang Night. So that's basically a vampire game. If you know the D20 system at all, and you know the storyteller system with the dots, right? And you know vampire, it's going to be immediately recognizable. It's just set in a fantasy world, and the vampires live in fire holes. The vampire is an accepted part of society. They don't have a masquerade. Their job is to protect the holes, the hell holes. These are holes in the earth that lead straight down to hell. And in between
Yes.
the surface world and hell, there's a whole series. It's called an abysma. It's a whole series of thousands of levels of dungeon, basically, of caverns and creatures that live under the ground, and they get their energy and heat from the hell below, the inferno. So the vampires are basically guarding the world from hell, and
Mhm.
their fire holds are basically castles that are built like a donut shape around the fire hold, as much to guard against the hellhole as from the outside world.
There's a
So
very
coming,
cool thing about Lost Learn because uh, those ideas are completely present. Like the hell is the hell. You can go there physically, and that's I think
yeah,
a very interesting way to put things to players. A very different thing
yeah,
because used to emulate a few things about the real world in this fantasy worlds, and sometimes it's not really catchy. Let's say that.
no, most fantasy feels like people's suburban sensibilities imposed in a medieval world, whereas in the medieval times, people did believe that hell was literally down below. And they
Yeah.
literally looked up in the sky and saw the stars, and they called it the firmament. They thought the stars were like on like it was literally firm up there, a dome, and they thought heaven was on top of that dome. So they thought literally you could look up and you could see the firmament was the underside of heaven, and if you dig a hole deep enough, you would get to hell. That's literally what most people believed on a common everyday basis. Maybe not the scholars, but
Mhm.
people believed that, because in the Middle Ages, of course, the scholars knew the world was round, um, because the Greeks had figured it out, and then
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
but for the average person, yeah, in their imagination, hell was straight down. So that was always the way I ran my role playing games, my fantasy games. Is that hell is the below your feet. It's much more. That's really fun and terrifying, right? That makes hell real to me. Like hell is a different dimension. That's such a modern idea.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's
A
such a
much more
modern
cooler
idea.
way to
You
talk
know,
about it is Lost Lawrence way.
yeah, and that stuff drives me nuts. Like I don't like the D&D where, um, you know, like the D&D movie. I really enjoyed it. I was really
Hmm.
happy it came out, but it just felt like the city scenes were so clean. It looked like a soundstage. It looked like Wizard of Oz,
Hmm.
and it just didn't feel like a real city at all. It felt fake.
Oh, I think
And I,
maybe
I
it's
like
a
gritty.
problem
I
with
like gritty.
maybe it's a problem with high fantasy idea of things. Like
Yep.
Yes, everything is clean and sharp and straight because you were trying to think the medieval world as we think the world today, and that was not idea. Things were dirty, people were very ugly, and sometimes the stories are very dark stories, like
Yeah.
maybe Game of Thrones. I think Game of Thrones brought a few things about this real medieval feeling to
It
the
did. It
movies.
did. Game of
Yeah,
Thrones was awesome, and
yeah, yeah.
you know, and so I think that kind of changed fantasy quite a bit, but not everyone got the memo.
Yeah, that's
Not,
true.
yeah.
Can we expect translation to other languages? I think.
Yeah, we already have some people who've inquired about translations, so we're definitely looking forward to that. That'll be high on our list of to-do items. And Portuguese is high on our list, of course.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. That's awesome.
And
Well,
then I did want to mention one thing, by the way. I'm
oh
actually my
yes.
my son and I are coming to Brazil in October. So we've been invited to the Nerd City convention in Rio de Janeiro.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to tell another convention, but if anyone does want to come see me, I will love to meet vampire fans. And that's going to be October 17th to the 20th in Rio.
So everybody's
Todo
invited.
Mundo Vai. I don't know what that means.
I will try to
Todo
figure
Mundo
that
Vai.
out. Uh,
Is
Todo
that
mundo vai. Everyone, everybody will go there.
okay? Okay.
Todo mundo vai. Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, I haven't been to Brazil in a long time, so I'm super excited. I truly love Brazil, and it's definitely one of my absolute favorite countries in the world. So
Hmm.
definitely my favorite people, and so yeah, I'm excited, and my son is super excited.
Cool.
He's 15, and he came with me once to a convention in Greece where we saw the Acropolis, and he loved that. And we went to a convention in France. So, but Brazil to him is like he's going to another alien world.
Uh-huh. Nice, nice. I hope you can enjoy and know other places other than Rio de Janeiro. I don't know how long you will stay. And
We
well,
have a week, so
a
yeah.
week.
Hopefully we can see. Maybe we can get to Sao Paulo. We'll see,
Okay,
or maybe go
okay.
up the coast. I haven't been up the coast in a while, so we'll see.
Yeah,
If
let
anyone
me know.
has any ideas or wants to invite me, I'll be there before the convention. So please
Okay,
reach out. I'm on Facebook as Mark Rein Hagen. So if you have any ideas, let me know. I would love to visit. If you're within 100 miles of Rio,
okay, nice. Well, I think we have to go to an end because we are talking for an hour now, and
yeah,
maybe it becomes it's sad, but we have to finish things. Once you said, every time you fail, you'll be stronger. You were talking about writing, and I guess it was filmed here in Brazil actually. When you said that, and I saw the video, I think it was a very interesting speech. And so I'd like to make this last question. That is, well, can you tell something else you learned about writing, and that maybe you can tell us, because Elysium is a convention that we like to give more space to people that writes, that creates, authors, game designers, illustrators, the creative thing, and not just playing and being like a hobby. We like to incentivize the creators. So I think it's a good thing. Maybe a word or two for the creators.
yeah. I mean, don't be afraid of pain or conflict or struggle. I think today a lot of people think that you have to make everything easy for people and make it just so And I agreed with that to some degree. Obviously, like access to people who are disabled, right? If someone's colorblind, you don't want to have a board game which is all colors, right? And then people who are colorblind can't play it, and you don't want to build a hotel that doesn't have handicapped access, right? But there is something about having pain and struggle and conflict in your life and in the life of the people you're writing for, which is good. Like we grow from that, right? We
Hmm.
grow from pain, from setbacks. If you never have pain or struggle and you never lose, right? You will never grow as a human being, and you'll be a very limited, shallow person. We all know people who've grown up so rich, right, and so privileged, right? They don't really have much of a personality. It's the whole beautiful girl syndrome, which you all know very
Hmm.
well. A girl who's been beautiful her whole life is much less interesting than, let's say, a beautiful woman who only became beautiful when she was 20, right? That like there's a difference, and we all know this to be true. You just can't talk about it in polite company because it's considered mean or rude or something. But
Hmm.
the thing is not the problem that there's a problem of being beautiful. The problem is that everyone just gives you everything you want because you're beautiful. You don't have to struggle as a person, and that is not good, right? It doesn't make you an interesting person. It doesn't make you complex. It doesn't give you depth. It doesn't. You can't be an artist, right? A true artist has to suffer. There's no doubt about that. And don't be afraid of suffering. Suffering is great. If you have to go work in a horrible job, at least look in your heart and go, oh, there's a nobility in this horrible job. I'm suffering. I'm learning something. I'm getting something done. If you have a struggle and pain in a relationship or at work or in life or with family or with friends, just understand that okay, on some level, yeah, sure, it sucks, but it's giving you stuff you can write about or create art about, and it's making you a more in-depth person. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
personally wouldn't I've had some horrible times in my life. I've been in the hospital for long periods of time. I've had horrible betrayals. Lost many, many friends over just, but I now understand the human condition so much better because of that. So I wouldn't give it up, you know? No, I don't wish that on my kids. But then again, do I? Or don't I? Maybe I do, because I would much rather have my child be old and wise, covered in scars, than old and stupid and
Yeah.
unblemished skin, right? So suffer and seek out pain. Don't be afraid of it.
Okay. What a nice message to end this interview. And I'd like to thank you again, Mark. Thank for your time. Thank for all your speech. And let's see if we can meet in Rio de Janeiro
Yeah,
when you come
I hope to
here.
see you, Eduardo. Thank you for having me, and good luck at your Elysium.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mark. And the
Bye.
recording. Bye.